Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. FST5 was collaboratively created by first responders and mental health experts to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, financial, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to FST5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Today, my co-host is Mike Waringa, a retired law enforcement officer and co-founder of To the Rescue. Mike Waringa is sitting in for Mike Mattern, our usual co-host, who will return in future episodes. At the time of this recording on November 22nd, 2024, Michigan had tragically lost 4 frontline workers to suicide in just a few weeks. Heartbreakingly, since then, another first responder has passed away. These devastating events underscore the critical need to address mental and behavioral health within our frontline worker community. This episode builds on the foundations set in our previous episode with Dr. Ali Amirsadri, transitioning the conversation from a clinical understanding of grief to the raw realities of processing tragedy in real time. We want to emphasize that the FST5 program is here to help. If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, do not hesitate to reach out and call 1-833-34-STRONG or visit FST5.org for more information. In this episode, we welcome back Ashley Freeman, an EMT and mental health advocate currently pursuing her master's degree in social work. She is also a volunteer with the Northwest Michigan Peer Support Network, where she helps support the mental health of frontline workers in the scenic and rural communities of Northwest Michigan's Lower Peninsula, a region known for its small towns, natural beauty, and close-knit communities. Ashley first joined us in episode 13, where she shared her personal journey of loss after her father, a dedicated paramedic, completed suicide in 2013. Tragically, she later lost her father's best friend and mentor to suicide as well. These experiences have deeply shaped Ashley's mission to advocate for frontline worker mental health. Her perspective as both a first responder and someone who has navigated grief firsthand adds a powerful voice to this episode. If you'd like more context, we encourage you to check out episode 13 titled Ashley's Story to hear her inspiring journey of resilience. You can find a link in the episode description. We are also joined again by Manisha Leary, the FST5 Program Manager and a trauma-focused therapist who has been instrumental in supporting Michigan's frontline worker community. Manisha brings her expertise to the episode, offering actionable insights into the emotional challenges frontline workers face and strategies for processing grief. Together, Ashley, Manisha, Mike, and I have a compassionate and impactful conversation about overcoming tragedy and the power of support. During the discussion, we address the emotional aftermath of recent tragedies and explore practical ways to support peers and families affected by loss. By validating emotions like anger and guilt and offering strategies to foster connection and healing, this episode delivers actionable tools to build resilience and solidarity within the frontline worker community. As always, we aim to provide a meaningful conversation that informs, educates, and inspires those on the front lines and their families. Please Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mike, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, you stuck around for the second recording. You know, you and I, in the previous episode, sat down with Dr. A, and we had a clinical discussion about the grieving process. And Dr. A, please help me, the head of psychiatry at Wayne State University here in Detroit, Michigan. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a big deal. He'll never say that out loud, but I will be his champion. That dude is smart. Mm-hmm. He says a lot of amazing things, and he gave us a very good clinical overview of why we feel, what the body's doing, and what's going on. So today's more of a follow-up to that conversation, and we're really going to get into acknowledging our emotions, processing them, navigating grief, all these other things in a more real way. You know, like I said, clinical last episode. This episode's more of like, okay, we all have been through this. Now what?
Real talk.
Real talk. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Ashley. Okay, so Manisha, hit us with it. Give an overview of the events over the past 3 weeks that have inspired this episode.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, our state has been hit pretty hard with suicides, first responder suicides over the last couple months, but we've never had this many in a short amount of time. We've had 4 over the last 3 weeks. That's happened all throughout the state of Michigan for all different reasons. And it just kind of made us think through the idea of not just using 1 month to talk about grief and critical incidences and things like suicide. We need to be able to talk about this and how to navigate post-trauma interactions, right? Like critical incidences, suicide, officer-involved shootings, anything that could happen to your department while you're out there. We really just wanted to have this conversation. And so we're hoping that today we can talk about things that people may be uncomfortable talking about, but after hearing us, maybe they'll be more comfortable in that space, and to also let the state know that there is support. We want to remind and drill people that we're here to help when needed.
Absolutely. And we'll get to all the things you just talked about. That's really good. He basically summarized everything we're going to talk about today.
Awesome.
But let's remind everybody about who Ashley is. Ashley, you were here for a previous episode where you got to tell your story. Mm-hmm. And you've experienced your father completed suicide. His best friend, which you were also close with, completed suicide. So you are probably well aware of what's going on potentially in the people around the people that recently completed suicide.
I have an understanding of what they're going through.
Yeah. Give everybody back an overview of your experiences, and then walk us into what you think those people are probably going on in their grieving process.
So I am a generational EMT. My dad was an EMT. His best friend was an EMT. I grew up in the first responder community. And in January 2013, my dad completed suicide. About 5 years later, his best friend completed suicide too. So it's been hard seeing all of these completed suicides come out in the past 3 weeks, because it brings up all those memories and those emotions of having to live without those people in my life. And it's hard when you have these dreams and these plans of how your life is going to go and what you're going to do with your dad or your husband or your brother or sister, 10 years from now, and having that just cut off is really hard.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you've been a big part of a lot of critical incident stress management situations with frontline workers. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So it's safe to say that, this is one of those. So give everybody some insight on the same thing. Where are you at with all of this?
I, too, have personally been affected by this through coworkers, my former fire chief, and those things as well. So it's very real to me personally, but through the training that we've had over the years and the opportunity to travel the state of Michigan and talk about critical incidences and training and education, it breaks my heart because this is a very, very real thing, and we are not exempt to this as first responders, and just having the ability to have those resources available. And I've traveled now almost 18 years around the state doing training, and I've been very blessed. I have yet to be in a county in the state of Michigan that has not had a first responder suicide. That's how real this is. That's how often this happens, but we just don't have the communication about it, and we need to do better as a core group.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question on that. So you've been in the room after a lot of these have happened, meaning in the room with the people that person works with. You've gone to these agencies. You've spoken with those people. Help us understand the emotions, that spectrum of grieving that you've seen. Whether it's anger, sadness, all the things. We talked about the clinical aspect of this, but in practical application, give us that experience and that viewpoint you've had.
Well, one of the things that I think it's a very common reaction is the anger. We talked a little bit about that earlier. But the anger can be very, very raw and very powerful. Anger at a brother or sister peer. Anger at the organization is a very real thing. Is the finger point. You want to blame somebody. You want to point that blame, and sometimes we don't realize how powerful that can be. And then there's a lot of guilt. The fellow responders, our coworkers, our peers are like, well, I didn't realize it had gotten to this point, or I knew he or she was struggling with this, but I didn't know this. And, trying to go back and put all those pieces of the puzzle back together, then they realize, oh man, we should have done something, or we should have said something, or I should have intervened. And it's hard. It's hard for first responders because it's a unique profession. When you look at your fire and police and your dispatch, EMS, corrections, they give so much to the job and to the organizations and to our community, but we're terrified to ask you or you a peer those questions that we ask when we're working.
We always say we're the worst patients.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I always like to ask this question to a lot of people. Why is that such a challenge for us? And sometimes it goes back to, policy, procedure, training when we were out in the field, or we're working that cell block, or answering that 911 call, or taking those calls for service, or dealing with the events that we deal with as first responders. But boy, when I sit across the table and look at a peer and ask those questions, it's terrifying to me, because I don't know what to do if you say, yes, I want to die. Yes, I'm suicidal. And so trying to get more resources, more training, make it more comfortable for us to have these difficult conversations with peers.
Going back to the emotions, I remember at my dad's funeral, one of his coworkers had intense anger, and I remember him coming and saying how he was going to, kick the casket, and he was so mad at my dad for what he did. And at the time, I didn't realize what was going on. I was going through my own grieving process, and I was just thinking, how could you think that would be a good idea? Why would you think that it would be okay to do this at his funeral? But looking back now, I know that he was grieving, and that was part of his grieving process. He didn't do it. He was just, he had intense emotions, and he wasn't sure how to express those in any other way but anger.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing we see, like I said, in the room. And I've felt this a number of times when firefighters, and I keep saying firefighters because I'm a firefighter and I'm close to this community, and you hear about what's in your community the same way Mike would hear in the law enforcement community. And a very common reaction, especially if they don't know the person, they know them in passing, it's a department over, they know the guy, but they don't know the guy, is this disappointment, which is almost under that anger category. Like, how could you do that? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You put your family at risk now?
Yeah.
And maybe you could kind of touch on that a little bit before we...
Yeah. Well, so emotions are strong. And I think we are kind of taught, especially in the first responder world, that there's certain emotions that we shouldn't show, there's certain emotions that we should bury, but every spectrum of emotion can be strong for any individual. And the important thing that I think for us to remember in this type of situation is that there is no right or wrong way to grieve. There is no kind of good or bad way to grieve. So if you're feeling this sense of disappointment or anger, frustration, or if you find yourself just the opposite of that, which a lot of people struggle with too, like remembering all the good times, remembering how happy this person made you, and like laughing in times when you think of this person. These are all really strong emotions. And so what I think, honestly, if we're trying to be honest with ourselves, what we want people to do is just kind of sit in those feelings. process with yourself why you're feeling that way. Process with yourself, why am I frustrated? Why am I disappointed? Why am I angry? And then kind of talk that out with yourself. Because talking to ourselves about it and admitting it to ourselves usually helps us feel comfortable talking about it with other people, right? And especially something like this. So absolutely, you can feel angry at the person for leaving their children or leaving their spouse or leaving you, even if you feel about that. And often that feeling, the being angry with someone because they left you, brings guilt, shame. You start to beat up on yourself for feeling like that. And quickly, one emotion is turned into another one, and now you're spiraling.
Which could lead into self-destructive
Exactly.
violence. It could, all the things we don't want it to be. So it's almost like saying, feel anger, do all that, but don't cross the line.
Yeah.
For your own sake.
For your own sake.
And that's such a tough thing. So
It's hard for first responders because the calls that we go to, we have to be able to disconnect from our emotions to be able to help that person. I have to disconnect from my emotions to be able to think critically for this call. So when you're not working, it's hard to flip that switch. It's hard to say, it's okay for me to feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that question that you asked, like, how do you stop the spiral? Sometimes you won't be able to stop the spiral. However, allowing yourself to feel your feels, as people say, or feel your emotions will help you stop from allowing the emotions to overtake you, right? So if I'm angry and frustrated and I just want to cry in that moment, allowing myself to cry will automatically reduce this need to lash out, right?
Because it is a process of grieving that can let go. The
Exactly.
crying is
It's
an
a process of
exercise
releasing.
Release.
Yep,
right?
it's a process of releasing, right? So crying in that moment, if that's what I feel like I do, instead of holding it in, I let it out. If you feel like you just want to scream and punch something and you're in your bedroom at the time, screaming in your bedroom and punching your pillow, let it out in that moment, right? Instead of holding that feeling in, because the release is what's going to bring you back down to a calmer mindset and more clear way of thinking. But again,
making that decision in the moment's hard.
Making that decision in the moment's very hard. And so we're not saying it's going to be easy, right? Nobody...
It's not like saying just count. No. It's we're
No.
acknowledging the
Yeah.
near impossible feelings I feel when I'm right there.
Exactly.
And you can't stop me from saying what I want to say or doing what I want to do. We've all felt that way. But it's making that decision to feel it because it's going to be fleeting. No.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you're going to have moments, again, where it'll be stronger sometimes and less the other times. I think really what's one of the things that I want first responders to kind of understand is that there's no right or wrong way to process it, right? The only way that you're going to be able to recognize what's best for you is tapping into your own emotions in that moment. It's the only way you're going to be able to realize what's best for you. Just like Ashley used the example with the friend that came to your dad's funeral, he was clearly angry and he clearly wanted to take it out because he missed his friend so much, right? Rationally, he knew that like wanting to kick the casket would not be useful or anything in that moment, but he said it. He said exactly what he wanted to do. He expressed himself in that moment. And that is probably the thing that brought him down. That was probably the thing that I expressed it. Now I'm hearing myself saying it. It's kind of irrational, something silly I wouldn't do, but that's how angry I am.
Can I kind of go back to the question that you brought up, a very good point, that sometimes maybe that the anger or the guilt or maybe the process of working through this as a first responder brings it back more on why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me as my partner? Why did you do this to me as my team? Which could have a little bit different impact than why did you do this to the organization? And those ripples can go a long ways out. But I found it kind of interesting that you said that sometimes is that a very normal question in the why. You know, why did you do this? We are partners. We work together. Those 12, 24, 48-hour shifts together. Why? Is that kind of another element of maybe going through that process, the anger, but then also the why? Because there's so many times we want to know, why did this happen?
It's the humanistic process of grief and mourning because our brains can't compute it, right? And the methods that people use, our brains are not designed to compute that and kind of wrap around it. So we have to find a reason for something, right? So like there has to be kind of a rational space around this. So all the time, the why question is something that naturally the person is going to ask. If you're losing someone unexpectedly, if you're losing someone that you didn't think was in the space of considering suicide, you're going to ask the why. The unfortunate part about situations like this is that it's not always answered, right? The person who leaves us may not leave the why. And so we have to do a better place of creating the why in our own mind, right? That can go very different for very different people. Creating your why can go very different for very, very different people. And because people want to create a why and find a reason, that's often where you see the blaming, the guilt, or, maybe internal struggles of you were being a jerk to him on Monday. Maybe that made him, like these kind of needing to justify and rationalize it in their own minds. And that as humans, that's what we do. So we can't beat ourselves up about that. Like it needs to make sense to us. And often suicide or even attempts don't make sense to people who aren't in that exact moment.
What's wild is, so my dad died. And then his best friend did. Well, when my dad died, I was in denial for a while. He worked night shifts, so I would say that, or I would tell myself that he was sleeping during the day. I'd leave the house when he would be up getting ready for work, and I'd come back home and tell myself, oh, well, he's just at work now. And I remember reaching out to his best friend and saying, this is what I'm feeling. Am I okay? And he helped me work through the grieving process some, and acknowledging that my dad was gone. And I remember then when his best friend died, I used those same tools that he taught me to grieve his death.
Wow.
I had to remember, I remembered what he said and how I can't lie to myself. I have to acknowledge the fact that he is not here anymore, that he's with Dad wherever that is, and they're together now.
We're talking about that initial reaction too. Walk us through the initial reactions that you went through, the anger, whatever it was. What was it for you?
So for me, when I was told that he was gone, I remember I didn't have my glasses on, and the only thing I was worried about was finding my glasses. And I remember being told, no, like, come here, like, we need to talk. And I remember getting so angry and saying, no, I can't find my glasses. I'm not doing anything. Like, nothing it matters right now except for finding my glasses, which was interesting because I didn't need my glasses to feel emotions. I didn't need my glasses to hear. But my brain didn't want to process what I was hearing, so it was focusing on something else than that. And like I said, then I went through the denial, and then there was anger because I didn't get my dad anymore. I'm still going through the grieving process. I feel like you have good days and you have bad days. For me, the Christmas season is always hard for my dad because Christmas was his favorite holiday.
And here we are.
And here we are, yes. And then with his best friend, because he helped me grieve my dad dying, I was able to use the tools that he had taught me to grieve his. So I wouldn't say that like my dad's and his best friends impacted me differently. I would say though that I was able to process it differently, and the second time around.
Yeah, when somebody, a friend of yours, and it's happened the second time, you know what to expect.
You do.
Yeah.
You know what's coming.
Oh, yeah. Or a
CPR?
CPR?
CPR.
Yes, your first one. Your second one, you're like, I got this.
The first time they say the tube's yours, all the stuff, you're like, eh. The second one's like, all right, I remember this, and you calm down, right? And it's almost a little bit like that. Or the brain, oh, I remember this.
Yes.
I know how to preserve myself. And like Dr. Ray told us, all these reactions are the way for your brain to find homeostasis and get away from the fear and the unknown.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what a lot of these reactions are.
And
Because the fear and the unknown is what our brains can't process, right? So there has to be some commonality in the feeling to our brains, right?
Correct.
So again, even if you are grieving over a suicide and this is something you hadn't experienced before, you might find yourself comparing it to something different. And people may be like, these are two completely different things, but you have to find that rationale within your brain. And it's okay. I think the hardest part for anyone who's experiencing this, not even just first responders, is that the reality is you're going to have a new normal.
Yeah.
yes.
There's going to be a new,
Whether you like it or not.
whether you like it or
And
not.
it's positive
there's
or
going to
negative
be-
based on your reactions. You get to
Absolutely.
develop it, and it sucks to do it because you didn't have a choice.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry
it's
to
a lot of
interrupt,
work.
but I just felt the need to say
No,
that.
that's it. That's exactly it. There will be something new happening after this. There will be life after that person has left. And at times it may not feel like it. You may want to buck against it. But the sooner that you allow yourself to feel these feelings and start to process it, the more organic the process will be for you and the healthier it will be for you.
And the growth will happen.
The growth.
It's not just getting back to, okay, I'm past it. No, it's achieving a new state of learning from those experiences and becoming a better version of you. The opposite of that is ignoring it, and then it's going to manifest in other things, whether it's self-destructive or otherwise,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I want to make clear to our listeners that we are not saying that you are going to forget someone,
No.
that you need to get over someone. You may never get over.
This isn't about that,
I hope
right.
you never forget someone that's significant to you. This is not that process. But you will have to create a life for yourself after losing this person. And that may be tough.
Speaking of which, let's get into some practical advice. So, Mike, you've traveled the whole country and worked with thousands and thousands of first responders. So what practical advice can you offer based on those interactions and all the things you've seen, heard, and helped people with? What advice do you have to offer for those that are grieving a loss or that will grieve a loss?
Well, absolutely. I think that having the ability to have resources, and those resources could literally be at home. I mean, it could be the relationship in your personal life. It could be resources at work. But talking to somebody in historically under our umbrella of first responders, that's not always been a very open dialogue of, hey, let's go talk about your feelings. It's always been that suck it up and push it down. And going back to your emotions, my wife has said to me over my career that you put a Mike work face on when you go to work. And she goes, I don't like work, Mike. She's told me that over the years, and we kind of laugh at it. But we're taught that to go do this job, and we maintain that. But we have to realize that sometimes we have to take work face off. We are human beings. We have emotions, and those emotions are different for every single first responder, every single human being. But to go through something like that, maybe just grabbing you and saying, hey, you got 5 minutes? I can't say it enough how important it is to talk to somebody, because oftentimes we're having very real and very raw emotions that other people have gone through. Maybe not exactly the same. It's different for everyone, but to understand that you're really not in this alone, and just reassuring them that.
Now, you're saying everybody. You're not saying trained peers. You're saying
No.
just to be a peer, be
Absolutely.
a
Be
human.
human.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talk about, peer concept and peer training, but this just sometimes is be a better human being, be a better coworker, be in a better relationship. To maybe you go talk to mom or dad or brother or sister or your spouse at home, and who is that outlet for you? It's different for everyone. And sometimes we will have people say, well, I don't have that outlet. I don't have that family. I don't have that peer that I know or love or trust. And then that's where we say, okay, then what are the resources we can get you? Whether this is the next level of care, a professional that we know, that we trust, having that availability and encouraging people to have those conversations in this career is huge.
I've been in that position. I've been to where I was low. I was having suicidal thoughts. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I remember I put myself impatient. I remember thinking to myself, I know what it's like to be the child of somebody who completed suicide. I can't do that to my kids. I know what it's like to live without him. I can't put my kids through that. So in that moment, it wasn't for me that I sought help. It was for my kids. But now I can say that I've worked on myself for me, because I have to be a better me before I can be anybody else's anything. And sometimes you just need somebody to talk to.
And often you just need someone to listen.
Right. And we keep coming back to this, is that connection and talking. So tell everybody and remind them the clinical aspect of that conversation, of what it's doing for that person. It's not just occupy their time.
Well, so because the healing process is not just, and all of us sitting here knows today's time, 9 times out of 10, someone is sitting there and they actually may not be present. So they may be looking at their phone or thinking about something else or doing all these different things. What most people need in these type of situations is just to listen, someone to give them their undivided attention, them to say, you have the floor to express however you want. You are safe here. You can say the things that you need. This doesn't leave here. And if you need advice, I'll give it. But if you don't, I won't. I'll just sit here and I'll be present with you while you figure out this processing. Because some people can process alone and some people can't. And the reality is it's usually healthier when you're able to talk to someone else about it, because you start to hear yourself talk about actually how you feel, which sometimes doesn't pop into that, right? Because you can work with someone and I can say, hey, you seem a little frustrated lately. I'm not angry. I'm good. Like, what are you talking about? You're just transferring your stuff to me, right? When we start to talk about it, in that moment, they can usually hear, dang, I just snapped on her. I didn't mean to be snapping like that. Like, well, you made me angry in that moment. And then we can have a conversation. Did I actually make you angry in that moment?
So is it like the brain becoming more self-aware to the realities around them?
It's the brain becoming self-aware, because the brain is always going to protect us. So whether it's figuring out who we can blame, figuring out if anger is protecting us from breaking down and crying, or, if our humor is protecting us from breaking down and crying and doing these things, the brain is always going to protect. But sometimes the brain doesn't realize that it's in protection mode. And talking to someone can help you pull yourself into that space of being like, okay, now I can hear that I'm threatening you, or now that I can hear that I'm frustrated, or now I can see that my behavior has been, a little different. And so I think because these situations are so unique and they're so individualized, there's if I experience this, Ashley can't really come to me and say, this is how you're going to feel, because she doesn't know,
Absolutely.
right? But she can totally come to me and listen and provide some perspective. And that's where I think, because these are happening more frequently, we're having more people who can help us through it. Mm-hmm. We have more people who are willing to listen. We have more family members who will say, let's go ahead and try. And so, of course, we don't want to be in this position as a state, but I think it puts us in a position of being a state who has a strong ability to help our first responders and to heal our first responders. And
Absolutely. And I think this is a giant call to action to just talk.
Yeah.
And when they need it, not this, and nobody's saying we need to all go to work and set aside time to just express our emotions to each other. We're not saying that.
Yeah.
There's no kumbaya here. None of that. It's just, do you see something, and should you say something?
Exactly.
It's just turning on the spidey senses more. Is that a human who might just need a buddy right now? And sometimes they don't want to talk about anything, but you washing a truck with somebody and BSing about the day is communicating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's almost like just connecting with the people around you, recognizing when people are withdrawn, seeing the differences in their character as they go about, and talking.
So I want to leave this with our listeners.
Please.
We did an interview with 2 gentlemen that were, one who was in the process of being on the Golden Gate Bridge and wanting to kill himself by that method. And one of the things that he said in this interview, and you guys can go back there on our YouTube page, you guys can go ahead and check this. It's called the Golden Gate Experience, I think is the name of the webinar. But one of the most powerful things that he said was, I had to drive to get on the bridge. I drove through. The lady didn't ask even why I was coming on the bridge. Normally they do when you pay the toll. I got out of my car, walked past a bunch of people who are clearly talking to each other, asking everyone if they're okay. No one said, ask me anything. No one talked to me at all. He said if any one person would have said, hey, how you doing? Or what are you here for today? He would have said, save me. He would have said, help me. And so sometimes that's all you need. That's all you need is someone to say, you all right today? You looking okay today? And thankfully he ended up finding someone who he can talk to in those moments that helped him come back over that rail, and he ended up not jumping. But I know people think that listening does not do a lot, and it can save someone's life.
I think it's everything.
I think it's everything.
And it's not just people that are going to complete suicide. It's acts against other people.
Absolutely.
It's all the things we're like, how could you do that?
You know what's so interesting about that? If you think about the work that police, fire, dispatch, corrections do, this first responder world, we do so much work and we do so much listening to our customers, if you want to call them that. People, human beings, just want to be heard. But yet we put on work face, go do this amazing stuff. But boy, when I need to talk to you, I won't do it. Even though I just got done for this whole shift, this whole career, whatever it might be, of listening to people and helping guide them in whatever direction they need to go.
Yeah.
But listening is so important. It's so important. But yet, as a culture of first responders, we struggle in this area.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for your time today. This was a really good discussion around the holidays, following some pretty intense things. But as we're talking again, as we're reminding everybody to talk, and what a better way to connect and communicate than the holidays. So although it can be a stressful time and produce stressful conversations with people, you don't have to talk about the bad stuff. There's plenty of cool stuff going on. The Lions don't suck.
Exactly.
If we can't bond as a community over our Detroit Lions,
we're going to the Super Bowl here.
Yeah.
This has not happened in some people's lifetimes.
multiple. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm convinced that we're going to do well.
I was in my 40s before they won their second playoff game in my lifetime. So This is fun.
This
is fun.
table right here is willing it to happen. They're going to get to
I'm just
the
hoping
Super
to
Bowl.
jinx it.
We're
All right. Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you next time.
Ashley, thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Again. And check out Ashley's episode.
Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.